ink and identity. We're going to be circling themes about identity, family, belonging, unbelonging in this in this land. And also I'm really excited to be here because I feel like we're in this next generation of storytelling for Asian Canadian diaspora. We're building on, of course, all that has come before. I'm really grateful for all the the great storytellers before us, and I think we're ready for the next generation, and as represented by these three wonderful authors to my left and their amazing books. So when I was asked to do this, I was thinking, okay, I'd love to. And then I thought I have to read a lot. And then, yes, I did have to read a lot, but they were all excellent reads. So we have Restaurant Kid, which is a nonfiction memoir. And then we have the novel Tiger and the Cosmonaut. And then we will have a reading of Ghost Bride of Gumsun. And they are all exceptional books, and I would encourage you all to get copies. So they are very, very different, but I do think they share very common themes as well. And I think we'll find that out as we tuck into them. I think we're going to go in the order as you see. So we'll go Rachel, Eddy, and then Jeannie. And to start off, I will give you a quick bio. Sorry. Rachel Phan is a best-selling author based in Toronto, a graduate of Toronto Metropolitan University's Master of Journalism program. She's shared her stories on CBC, Toronto Star, The National Post, HuffPost, Maclean's, and Chatelaine. Her first book, Restaurant Kid, a memoir of family and belonging, was released in April 2025, so just fresh off the presses, and became an instant national bestseller. Her work often explores the impacts of racism, assimilation, fetishization, and forced displacement on one's feelings of identity, belonging, and self-worth. For more information, you can visit rachelphan.com and follow her at Rachel M. Phan. And this just in, Rachel has just signed another deal for her second book, a book of essays, I believe, which is due out next fall. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. I wish everyone had the chance to hear such lovely things about themselves. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Phan. I wanted to start this off by providing a little bit of context about who I am, especially since I wrote a memoir. I grew up in the 90s in super small town Canada, in the most southern town in Canada. It's called Kingsville. About 5,000 people when I grew up, and I think it was like 99% white. I grew up in, I think my elementary school, it was me. And then in grade 5, a Korean boy came in. So it was just 2 Asians in the entire school. So I grew up never really feeling like I quite belonged anywhere. And when I looked to the media for representation, I didn't find it there either. I never really saw anyone who looked like me or my family in books, on TV, in the movies, just nowhere. So I really wanted to explore a lot of those themes of what it was like growing up, feeling this disconnect and not really knowing who I was and not really seeing a lot of models. And I also wanted to show in my book and to celebrate and honor the stories that are so common that don't get a lot of shine, of like families who are working class, who are loud, who are messy, who are not crazy rich or exceptional. We're just everyday Canadians just trying to survive in this country. So I'm hoping that my memoir did that I honored that life, that I honored my family and my upbringing. So I'm excited to read from my book. While my parents scrambled to learn the ins and outs of running a restaurant, I'm learning lessons too. I learned fairly quickly that when you're a restaurant kid, you're never really alone, even though you always feel a little lonely. You're constantly trying to get out of the way of your family members who are busy working, or you're being doted on by a waitress when she has a moment to spare, or you're making polite chit-chat with the regulars who help keep your family's business afloat. Your entire life is marked by the constant thrum of the restaurant. The restaurant is always the center of attention, never you. The restaurant quickly becomes your entire world. It's never just a restaurant. It's evidence your parents, who gave up everything for a chance at a new, safer life, have succeeded. They've made it. The restaurant was and is everything. It is our family room, with the TV blaring in the kitchen during slow hours. We play music videos of Dad's favorite songs. He sings along to Eternal Flame by the Bangles on repeat, or make our way through piles of Chinese dramas on VHS tapes. What's he saying, I ask? And Dad translates from Cantonese to English while he puffs on a cigarette in between the rushes of lunch and dinner. I love these quiet moments best because it always feels like I have my parents to myself. I don't have to compete with the customers at table 5 who are waiting for their dinner for 3. Once when it is dead inside, Dad takes me outside and asks if I want to sit on his shoulders. I quickly say yes, pleased by the novelty of his attention. But the moment my stumpy little legs bracket his neck, I want off. I am not a child who takes to playing naturally, my earliest years punctuated by so many hospital stays. I never learned how to play freely with the careless, reckless abandon, because I always had to be so careful. Rather than seeking thrills, I learned to prize stability and security. I'm so frightened by my feet parting ways with the ground that I grab fistfuls of my dad's hair and shout, "Down, down, down." The nervous flipping in my stomach prevents me from enjoying even 10 seconds atop my dad's shoulders. My dad, laughing, listens to my desperate pleas to be put down before rushing back into the kitchen. Later, when I'd feel like a ghost in my busy parents' lives, I'd wonder why I didn't relish that moment with my dad more. It wasn't often that he gave me the full weight of his attention, not when there were so many chicken balls to make and the wok to attend to at all hours of the day. In those moments when I'd feel the ache of my parents' absence, I would wish for retroactive bravery and the ability to hold firm to my dad's head and shoulders, trusting that he would never let me fall, willing him to never leave me, believing he would always keep me elevated on a pedestal. To my horror, the restaurant is also my parents' battleground. When restaurants are busy, the people being run ragged in the kitchen are never at their best. Tensions are high, curse words fly off the tip of your tongue without a thought, and no one's personality is sparkling. That all becomes 10 times worse when your spouse is constantly in your space. You never get a break. When my parents fight, nothing is off limits. During their frequent kitchen blow-ups, Mom and Dad throw chicken balls hot out of the deep fryer at each other while cursing in Cantonese. A veritable smorgasbord of items are sent flying, from the expected, dishes, cutting boards, mushrooms, to the surprising and downright dangerous, knives of various lengths and sharpness, whole plates of cooked food. I'm going to skip the next part. There's a lot of swearing in it. My siblings and I cower in the dining room, my sister paralyzed by anxiety and willing herself to disappear, while my brother rocks back and forth, his left leg bouncing with nerves. As the baby of the family, I am given the unenviable task of diffusing the situation with my charm and elevated status. As the youngest and smallest, I need to be protected and cared for the most. That is the expectation, at least. "Go in there, May," my brother and sister say. "Tell them to stop." Pushed into the kitchen, into the eye of the storm, I yell with the full force of my little lungs, "Stop fighting! They can hear you all the way in China!" That is always my go-to line. It usually works and leads to tenuous peace between the two warring factions until the next time a grenade is thrown. Do I have time to read another? Okay, I'm going to read just another short. So this is more related to my struggles with feeling a place of belonging. For so many people in my town, my family and I are the first Chinese people they've ever met. We get put into a lot of boxes. The hardworking immigrants, the dutiful children helping their immigrant parents out and sacrificing fun and weekends to do so, the scary other here to take your jobs and your man, the yellow peril right in your own backyard, the brainy, ambitious nerd, the hypersexual, unrepentant slut, the meek and submissive doormat, the dirty little secret. I am all of these things. I am none of these things. As a young Chinese person growing up in a sea of pale faces, I felt confined by the available roles I could play. I was trapped by those boxes. Although others were free to explore their own identities, I felt pressure to fit into specific molds. No matter what I did or how much I tried to fit in and be normal, I still felt like I belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I was caught between two cultures. The media I read, listened to, and watched were primarily Western. All my childhood friends were white Canadians, but I never quite felt Canadian enough. My nationality has always had an asterisk beside it or hyphen right before. I was raised by parents who were vocal about being proudly Chinese, but since they were too busy trying to keep the lights on and the customers happy, they didn't have time to pass things down to us like language, culture, and traditions. There were no temples or community centers to help make up for the lack. Often, I didn't feel like a real Chinese person at all. I responded to my parents in English. I didn't live in a city where I could go to Chinese schools, so when my cousins from Toronto visited, I felt like a half-baked Chinese person. I struggled to follow their speech, their mannerisms, their snacks. I had one foot in each culture, but I never felt like I belonged in either. I operated in the hyphen, the liminal space. No matter where I was, at home or at school, I felt like a fraud. I later learned the term third culture kid, which is used to describe a child who grows up in a culture different from the one their parents grew up in. Third culture kids often feel confused about where their loyalties lie. Many have no idea who they really are or where home is. They often feel ignorant of their parents' home culture and later feel a painful disconnect from it, especially when it comes to the loss of language. For many third culture kids like me, it's hard to feel a sense of belonging or identity anywhere. I'm somehow both too Chinese and too Canadian. No matter where I am, I'm too much of something to truly fit in. Growing up, I tried to dull my pointy edges, change who I was depending on my circumstances, and become a diluted, murky version of myself. I changed with the seasons. I became whoever the person I was talking to expected me to be. I pretend I didn't notice how lonely it was to feel like I could never be myself. I discovered later just how common it is for third culture kids to have a weak sense of self. You can't really know who you are when you don't feel like you belong anywhere. My identity wasn't anchored to anything concrete, and because I didn't know who the hell I was, I didn't put up a fight when others knew better than I did.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Rachel. So I prepared a whole bunch of questions, which I'm guessing we're not going to get through. But I would like to ask about the restaurant, because I feel like the restaurant, for those of you who've read it and those who will, you'll notice that the restaurant is like a really big character. It's a huge presence in the book, in their lives. And I just wanted to know, like, from Mei Mei Inn to China Village, it feels like it's an identity that at times your whole family resented or resents, and at other times very much finds solace in. I just wanted to ask you, can you speak a little bit about like this ambivalence that you feel towards this restaurant?
Yeah, so one of the main things I wanted to get across with the book was I'd never wanted the restaurant to feel flat. I wanted the restaurant to feel like a living, breathing character, because to my family, it is. Like, I call it the most annoying, reliable, stalwart, unwavering family member we have, because it's kind of the glue that brings us all together at the end of the day. Like, New Year's Eve, we're all in the kitchen working to this day. It's what our primary driver has always been. It's where so many of our main family memories have been made. So for me, I didn't want it to feel flat. I didn't want it to be in the background. It is very much central to everything, to our lives, to our past, to our identities. So in order to do that, there needed to be complexity around the restaurant. It had to be the thing that we hate because we do resent it, but also the source of so much awe and respect, because it is the reason why I'm sitting here as an author today, was that, my parents were able to provide for our family because of that restaurant. So definitely a love-hate relationship, but I think that's real to family. Yeah.
Oh, that is so real. So I guess I won't be inviting you to any New Year's Eve parties, but I can't go. I think I have time for one more question, and that is around names. When I read your decision to change your name or your family name from Poon Mei Mei to Rachel Marie Phan, that was actually very affecting, because growing up, I too did not want to be Wiley Wei-Chiun Ho, which nobody could, seemingly spell or pronounce properly. So I kind of fantasized about being like Megan Holt. I thought, actually, that'd make a really good pen name. But anyway, I was just curious, like, can you comment a little bit about this need that newcomers to this country have to distance ourselves in some ways from our roots in order to fit in? And did you ever consider writing this book under your Chinese name?
Yeah, I think I didn't, just because my life, I lived it as Rachel Phan, and I feel like if I'm writing about it, I should write it as me, just Rachel Phan. And yeah, I think my parents, they learned pretty early on, moving to that super small town, that they needed to have anglicized names. They needed to speak English so they could speak to their customers. So all those decisions were really just survival tactics for our family. Like my real anglicized name is Rachel My Fan, and I remember just being teased for like, what kind of name is my? When you think about it as an adult, it's like it's not enough. Like it's not even like that intense. But kids can be cruel, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to christen myself Rachel Marie Phan, because everyone's middle name is Marie. And then like when I would tell people that was my middle name, they'd be like, oh yeah, like that's my middle name too. So it's just a way for me to connect with people and to feel like I was, normal and like I belonged with.
So I think we have to move on now to Eddy. Eddy, welcome. Eddy Boudel Tan is here with his third book, and he's been a finalist for the Edmund White Award, the Relit Best Novel Award, and the Pharaoh Grumley Award for his novels After Elias and The Rebellious Tide. The Writers' Trust of Canada named him a rising star in 2021, and I would say his star is still rising. His short stories can be found in Joeland, Yoke, and various literary journals and anthologies. The Tiger and the Cosmonaut is from Penguin Canada, and it's his third novel, like I said. And you can follow Eddy on Instagram at Eddy Automatic and at eddyboudeltan.com. Welcome, Eddy.
I'll say first off that I didn't realize that photo was going to be projected behind me. Otherwise, I might have worn something different. But alas, here I am. So like Wiley said, I'm the author of The Tiger and the Cosmonaut. It came out just about 2 months ago. And say 2 years ago, I had my first meeting with my would-be editor. This was before the book deal. This was before he was convinced that he was going to acquire the book. And he set up a meeting with me and my agent just to, I guess, suss me out. And I was very, very nervous because I knew he was interested. Apparently, he had read the book in 2 days, like the manuscript in 2 days. And I felt like we were almost there. And his first question to me was, so tell me, what's the book about, in your words? And my answer was, it's about Asian rage. And I don't know why I said that. It was not planned. I did not have that planned. And if the goal was to catch his attention, I think it worked, because he visibly, reacted, and he said, that's interesting. Okay, tell me more. And I didn't have an answer prepared. It was all just coming out. And I've had a lot of time to think about it since then. And I think what it comes down to, what is Asian rage? What makes rage distinctly Asian? I don't know, but I think it's perhaps the outcome or byproduct of our community in Canada being minimized, being expected to act a certain way, to perhaps be more obedient than we may want to be, to play the role of what's often called the model minority. And I've had a lot of time to process this since I had written this book. And so that's really, in a sense, what The Tiger and the Cosmonaut is about. It's about Asian rage, but as I thought through this more, I realized that it's not just about Asian rage. It's also about Asian loss. It's about Asian longing. It's about Asian promise. And those are the, I think, themes that I hope come through in the book. I'll tell you a little bit more about what the book is actually about. So it follows 3 estranged adult siblings who are forced, in a way, to reunite in their isolated hometown in BC when their father has gone missing. And their father is soon found, wandering the vast woods beyond the family home, confused and clutching a pair of scissors. And it becomes somewhat clear to the siblings, at least, that their father might be trapped in the memory of their family's most tragic night, when their youngest brother went missing in the same woods several years earlier. And so what this book does, what I hope it does, is just examine how the fears and the insecurities of immigrants are often exploited by society. And it shows, at least in this story, what happens when one family decides that they've had enough. So with that, I will read the beginning of The Tiger and the Cosmonaut. I was born on the side of the road shortly after sunset, beneath the thinnest sliver of moon. There was no hospital in Wilhelm, so my parents took the chance of driving an hour to the coast for the nearest maternity ward. They piled Nadia and Ricky, still toddlers at the time, into the family van and sped along the road that sliced through the forest. They didn't make it. I've seen the van in photos, black with a turquoise stripe along the side. My mother's pain had become so intense that my father pulled over at the midway point between our town and the hospital. We were surrounded by a wilderness, deep and dark. He laid a blanket on a patch of grass and helped my mother onto her back while Nadia and Ricky watched from the van's sliding door. There was barely any moonlight to guide my father's shaking hands. My mother pleaded with the stars until my cries joined hers, echoing against the trees that watched over us. I've always found this story hard to believe. It would sound more like folklore than fact, as my father told it with a zealous gleam in his eyes. But my mother would nod along instead of correcting him, as she often did. I brought good fortune, at least according to Chinese astrologers. You were born beneath a new moon, my father would say. The moon of the tiger, in the year of the tiger. You're both lucky boys. Sam would always smile at this point in the story. He might have been the troublesome one, but he understood how to believe. I know now that our father was wrong. It wasn't a new moon, which is always invisible to the naked eye. The silver crescent that night meant it was a young moon instead, when it would have been far enough from the sun to reflect some of its light. I wish I could believe that the heavens aligned to grant me the luck of the tiger, as Sam once did, but I know the truth is simpler. We were merely two boys born on the side of the road because our father couldn't drive fast enough. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Eddy, this book was, it was a really slow burn for me. Like I got into it and then it just felt like they were family almost. And I wanted to comment on that because I felt like it's on the surface a tale of, a mystery of what happened to a boy who went missing a long time ago. But as I got into it, I felt like it really became a mystery of identity and our true selves, as well as like those people closest to us that we end up not knowing very well. It's really a masterclass in character development, I feel. So I wanted to ask, did you create these characters to explore specific themes that you had in mind, or did the story come first and then the people came in after?
Yeah, thanks, Wiley. First, thanks for saying that. I like to reel people into my stories, so I like to think that they're being pulled in deeper and deeper and deeper. So, hearing that you slipped into the story the way that you did means a lot to me. So with this book, first off, it is not autofiction. This is one of my little author insecurities, that people will read this and think that the family depicted is my family, some of whom are here. So let's make that point clear. But at the same time, it does reflect many elements of my identity, who I am, and my lived experiences. When I started writing this book, I knew that I wanted to write a story that better reflected my identity. And what I wanted to write, the story that I wanted to tell, was about the experience of what it's like about being second generation, specifically second generation Chinese Canadian. And I think a lot of what you said, Rachel, just resonated with me. And that's much of what I wanted to depict in this novel. And so what is the second generation Asian Canadian experience? I don't know. It might be different for someone else other than me, but I think there are some shared experiences, a shared feeling of being caught between cultures, like you said, not feeling fully Canadian, yet not feeling fully Chinese either. I grew up in the suburbs of Vancouver, and I've always felt Canadian. I felt like I was as Canadian as any of my friends, but every so often someone would ask me, "So where are you from?" And I would tell them, I'm from Vancouver. I was, born in what's now BC Children's Hospital." And that never seemed like a satisfying answer to them. And sometimes they would just nod, and other times they would press on and they would say, "No, no, no, where are you from?" And that answer wasn't easy for me either, because my parents, they moved to Canada when they were a young couple, and they spent their childhood, much of their youth, in Brunei, where they were born. Their own parents immigrated to Brunei from China during the war. And so when someone asks me, where am I from? If Canada is not a satisfying answer, then is it Brunei? Is it China? Like, I don't know. And so that, I think, is an experience that a lot of other second generation Canadians can relate to, this feeling of being caught between cultures, not feeling fully Canadian, yet not feeling fully of one's heritage either. Perhaps a sense of duty towards one's heritage, balancing that with aspirations and ambitions that are very distinctly Canadian. And that was the story that I wanted to tell. So when it comes to characters, to address your question a bit more directly, the characters ended up forming themselves. I wanted to depict what I thought in my mind was a fairly typical Chinese Canadian family living in Canada, contending with many of the things that Chinese Canadian families contend with. And each of the family members are very different. They're very distinct. And in a way, I did that because I wanted to show that despite how different we may be in terms of personality and character, something that we all share is the experience of being a second generation Canadian.
I think you definitely achieved all of those things, because not only did you create riveting characters, I think the themes that you talk about are right front and center. And I think it's really exciting because we are into this next phase of diasporic writing. I think this is not just about, coming to a new country anymore. It's about what's next. So a quick question on setting. So the town that this is set in is fictional, but it's on a real coast, which is the Sunshine Coast of British Columbia. And I'm just wondering how you decided to set it in a fictional town rather than a town that we're all familiar with. I'm wondering about the choice of that. I think there are a bunch of writers here, so this is kind of a geeky question, but I'm curious.
Setting is one of my favorite things to write in a book. I cannot seem to set any of my stories in a real place. I like to invent them. And so I invented this town. And often what readers ask me is, so where is this town? Like, what town is modeled after? Yeah. And some people think is it Nelson, BC? Is it Lund? Is it Gibson's? And it's meant to be a bit of all of them. It's meant to depict your average, isolated, progressive seeming town in British Columbia. And I had a lot of fun writing this town and inventing, their lore and their norms. And even though it does reflect real places, it's informed by the cultural and geographic context. It's also a place that I ultimately created. So something that I'm hoping that I achieve with this book. I never write in messages or anything. Like, sometimes people ask, what do you want to leave with the reader? there's nothing specific I want to necessarily leave with them. I want people to interpret a story and experience it the way that they interpret and experience it. But one thing that I do hope some readers take away from it is something of a responsibility or a inspiration to better discern the truth behind progressive facades. And I think that's especially true for a place like BC, in which people tend to think of BC as this place where everyone is hugging trees and sitting around in a circle, singing Kumbaya. Is that true, Rachel? You're from Toronto. Do you think of BC like that?
I don't know. I thought I saw some people singing Kumbaya in the circle yesterday.
I would not be surprised. But there's more to it. And I think that there is this real danger, I guess, in believing these progressive facades, the virtue signaling that so many places and spaces and people tend to do, because often the truth is murkier. And Wilhelm, BC, this fictional town, is a perfect representation in that they have a rainbow crosswalk. They have all these hallmarks of a progressive place in a progressive seeming province. But you peek beneath the hood and it's a lot more complicated than that, just as it is in any community.
And I think that's so interesting because your book is, like there's a lot of dualities and twinning of things. Of course, the main characters are twins as well. Anyway, great read, everyone. So, but we do have to move on. Thank you, Eddy. So we're traveling the gamut in genres tonight. We're going from nonfiction. We've gone from nonfiction to fiction. And then now we have the most dynamic book I've read in a long, long time. It's cross-genre. It is fantastical. It involves Western mythology and also Eastern mythology. And it's set in so it's also historical fiction because it's set in 1869 San Francisco. It's a Ghost Bride of Gum San. J.F. Garrard is an award-winning spec fiction writer, editor, publisher, and host of the Artsy Raven podcast about writing and publishing. She is president of Dark Helix Press, the Canadian Authors Association Toronto branch president, and deputy editor for Rice Paper Magazine. Yay. I don't know when you find time to write, actually. Her portfolio of books and short fiction is listed on jfgerard.com. You can find her on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at jfgerard. So that was the short version, but I also found out that she is a humanitarian and community organizer. Besides being a strong champion for writers, she has a background in nuclear medicine and healthcare. In 2022, the Canadian government awarded Jeannie and her team the COVID-19 Humanitarian Service Medals for their work on anti-Asian racism. Thank you very much.
I was first invited to LiterASIAN in 2015 by Jim Wong Chu, and I remember at the time I had written a East Meets West vampire book, and I remember asking him, I was like, why did you invite me? I'm like, nobody. And he's like, well, who do you know writes this sort of thing? I was like, nobody else. And he's like, okay, then you can come. And it was just so welcoming, and he was so encouraging. Listen, because I remember at the time I was applying to go to university, and I said I want to do English, like Evelyn Lau, who was a poet laureate of Vancouver. And then and she had that book at the time, her memoir came out. And then my mom's like, so you want to be a prostitute and write? And I said, no, mother, I don't think you have to prostitute and write. But she said, I will not support you if you do English, because I did it. And I made it all the way, and I had a master's degree. It didn't work out for me, so it's not going to work out for you. So do something else. So I went to nuclear medicine, which is fine because I love science as well. And I didn't start writing until later, after I had a stable job and income. But part of the reason why I write speculative fiction, honestly, I blame my parents, because I don't remember how old I was. I was stuck in a playpen. And I don't know if you remember VHS tapes. They're very long. And in the beginning, there were Chinese cartoons. And then towards the end, there were horror movies because our friend suddenly decided to tape horror movies for some reason. So, and I remember crying out for help and nobody came. And then you were stuck with this horror movie while you're in a playpen. So I don't know if that's why part of my that's why I like writing horror. I mean, a lot of my characters are all in survival mode. And I'm going to read from my book, Ghost Bride of Gumsan. It's about these girls that have a father that sold them off to be brides. Well, actually, they were sold off to be muijai, which is just to supposedly do domestic work in America. So they start off in China. And this is the part where they wake up and they're on a boat. So I'm just going to read this part. Chapter 2. Jie, older sister, wake up. I woke up bleary-eyed to my sister's frantic shouts. Turning my head, my eyes widened at her being held by two men in dark mandarin-collared tunics with half-shaved heads and long braids. The floor felt as if it was moving, and I felt an odd pressure on my chest. Looking up, I shrieked when I realized a man was straddling the top of my stomach and groping me with dirty, thick fingers. A combination of waking up, being touched by a man with a terrible stench, and feeling my body swaying on unsteady ground caused an awful sensation inside me to bubble up, and a forceful cough came out, spraying blood onto the man's face. He let out a screech and fell over backwards, his long braid flying into the air as he rubbed his eyes. Oh, she spat blood at me. He wiped his face. His startled companions let Juk go, and she moved my body into an upright position. I told you she wasn't feeling well. Leave us alone. What's going on? A thunderous voice turned our heads towards the door. A tall man with a large black beard walked in through the doorway, crouching to avoid hitting the wooden ceiling of the ship, and the men who had been bothering us immediately lined up in a row. The gold threads of the dragon embroidered on the man's dark tunic glimmered under the rays of sunlight streaming in from the small oval window, which also illuminated the room's wooden walls and floor. Captain Lau, we were inspecting the goods, the man said. Why is your face bleeding? Why is she bleeding? Did you do something to her? The large man asked in a stern voice, his thick braids flipping as he strode over to stare down at the smaller men. I didn't do anything. The buyers want virgins. Since you contaminated her, I'm going to deduct half your salary. No, please, I need the money to feed my family. Well, you should have thought of that before you inspected the goods. And you too, half of your salary will be deducted as well. Now leave before I feed you to the sharks instead. Shoulders slumping, the three men left with their heads down, bringing a collective sigh of relief from the young girls in the room. There were a dozen of us, all skinny, frightened creatures, around the same age, all having been taken in the night, shivering in thin, patched-up clothing. One girl with dark bruises and cuts on her face was curled up in a ball in the corner, trying not to be noticed. Thank you for your help, sir. My sister went on her knees and bowed towards the captain. The large man looked at her and let out a laugh. He leaned down to grab my sister's chin and gazed at her face. You're a smart and pretty thing, aren't you? What a waste. Captain Lau, I brought you some porridge to feed them. A willowy man with a soft voice floated into the room with a bucket and some bowls. The pale green color of his cheongsam reminded me of the bamboo forest near our village. There was a softness in his hazel eyes and face, unlike Captain and the other rough men we encountered. Teacher Fu, feed them and teach them well. I want them to be the most beautiful, graceful girls in the Queen's room when we auction them off in America. I want everyone to know Kwang Dak Tong has the best goods on the market. Of course, Fu let out a high-pitched giggle and covered his mouth with a well-manicured hand. Captain Lau winked at my sister and then left the room. Teacher Fu placed the bucket down and cleared his voice before speaking to us. His high-pitched voice, slow movements, and graceful arm gestures reminded me of eunuchs who were in charge of selecting concubines for the emperor in the Forbidden City palaces. My name is Teacher Fu, and over the next few months, I'll be bringing you food and teaching you how to be delicate ladies. This ship is full of rough, uncivilized sailors, so I'll be keeping the doors locked at all times to avoid any more unfortunate incidents. Only Captain Lau and I are allowed to enter the room. If anyone else comes in, let me know, understand? I pinched my arm to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Where was I? Why were we here? My sister raised her hand. Excuse me, Teacher Fu, where are we going? You're all headed to Gamsan, the golden mountain in America called San Francisco. It's a fun city with actual mountains and lots of gorgeous buildings. The streets of Chinatown are filled with red lanterns. They have fireworks in July, and the Guaylo, the white devil people, have such interesting clothes. Their ladies have such tiny waists because they stuff themselves into corsets made of wire that look like bird cages, and their silk dresses have beautiful ruffles and lace. I don't understand, I sputtered. Why are we on this boat? Did you kidnap us? Oh dear, look at you. Teacher Fu raised an eyebrow at me, his eyes tracing my strong jawline and thick arms. It's going to take a lot of work to turn you into a proper lady. Anyhow, we didn't kidnap you. From the stories I heard on the deck, most of your families received a bag of money exchanged for you to become a mujai to serve as servants on board, abroad. My sister and I looked at each other. This all suddenly makes sense. Father's creditor had become more numerous over the last few years, and we were the only assets he had left to sell. I clenched my fists as I thought about punching my father in the face. Is being a mujai the only option we have? My sister asked. Well, that's why I'm here. If you follow my teachings, there's a possibility you may end up as a wife or mistress of a rich merchant. That's a better life than become a mujai servant or a prostitute. Prostitute? My mouth dropped open at the thought of more strange men groping me. In the last round, none of the girls headed down that road. Teacher Fu smiled and clapped his hands. Most of them were married off, and the boss was happy. Look, just do as I say, and things will work out. Okay, I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Judy. Like I said, a fun romp. It's a total page turner because there's just like adventure after adventure, mishap after mishap. All the things that befall our protagonists is really quite fun to read. But Judy, I have to ask, you gave us a little hint earlier that this fascination with horror started in the playpen. But you've given us a quite a heady blend of like mythological, historical fiction, fantasy, adventure that pulls in Asian mythology, Western lore. We get Taoism, Japanese yokai mythology, which is like demons, and as well Western Christianity. It's really, really interesting. It's very imaginative. And I'm just wondering what was behind, what was the inspiration for this genre-bending, intercultural mix of an adventure tale?
Well, like I said, I grew up, I guess, in the 90s. I think that was the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, where there was so much fantasy movies and whatnot. Like, that was when they had money and they could make all these films. And I grew up with that stuff. But also in my household, my mother was Roman Catholic and my dad was Buddhist. Then I had an uncle that was Taoist. So all this sort of influenced me in a way. I mean, I didn't, obviously at the time, you don't know how much you take it in, right? And then I read a lot as a child. I think up to grade 5, I was reading normal books, I guess. I remember really idolizing Sweet Valley High and just thinking maybe one day I'll wake up and I'll be blonde and all that stuff. And it didn't happen. So then I turned to Stephen King, which seemed like a natural progression, really. And then I guess I find fantasy is a safe place. I think a lot of people in my family, whether they admit it or not, they're very creative people, but that also means they are very emotional and they take things internally, I guess, and things hurt more. So I think fiction and fantastical fiction, especially, it's a safe place to explore a lot of themes instead of like using a more realistic setting, I guess, like, because, supposedly, like the yokai and demons, supposedly they don't really, like they're supposed to a metaphor for something, like they don't really exist. So in a way it's safer to explore it that way than thinking people are terrible, because sometimes they are. But anyhow, sorry, I was just telling a story earlier about getting into a fight at Costco, for example. The depth, like the worst of humanity is at Costco on a Saturday. So I will not go to Costco on Saturdays anymore. But anyhow, sorry.
Well, I would have loved to have had the protagonist, Pearl Mingju Wong, as a role model growing up, because I read a lot of, as I think many of us did, of my generation, Judy Blume books, and they're great books, and as well as Nancy Drew mysteries. But I never saw such a kick-ass, like, demon hunting Taoist sorceress.
I think I was always searching for a female protagonists to relate to. I mean, even in all the Hong Kong movies, most of the people doing the saving are men. Like, there isn't too many women. I mean, the only one I can maybe think of is like the heroic trio, which is Anita Mui and Michelle Yao was in it.
Mhm.
But the story wasn't that great. So anyhow, I just hoped, to see more female protagonists. That's why, part of why, like, all my books have females in it. So
That's great. And I like to ask, so I felt like as I was reading through, the line between human and demon gets pretty blurred actually as I'm going through, and it leaves me to wonder if perhaps this, the barrier between humanity and mythology is almost kind of porous. Like, is that what you were intending for the reader to feel, like that there's this ambiguity in not only morality, but also what constitutes as like human or worthy?
yeah, I mean, because in a lot of the mythology, the stories are that animals eventually over time, they gather so much energy and they become human. Apparently being human is like the best thing on earth, right? So obviously you want to be human. Why do you want to be a demon? But at the same time, it was also a metaphor for different ethnic races, because I was thinking, people are intermingling in the new world. Does it matter what kind of race, or if they're a demon or not? I mean, if they're willing to work together, they're making a better world, because they all come from different places, including the demons. They immigrated too. So, everybody immigrated.
Even immigrants.
So,
Yes. No, it's really, really a fun book. I'd like to open it up to all three of you and just have a general discussion on, how you think your books might be in conversation with each other.
Well, just listening to the conversation up here, I just want to say how cool it is that we have such a diverse mix of authors here with such wildly different types of work, right? From memoir to fiction to science fiction and fantasy. And it's really interesting to see how there are common threads in all of them, just reflecting what we share in common as people. Much of the themes that we've been discussing tonight. And so I just wanted to recognize that. It might be pointing out the obvious. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's how I felt too. Was that when I saw, I just read the backs of these books first, and I thought, how in the world am I gonna pull them together? But after reading them, I think, wow, they actually are in conversation with each other, even though there's such different subject matter and different protagonists and just very different, just very different styles and voices, but they all feel like they're kind of part of a very extended family in many ways. And do you have anything to add to that, Rachel?
Well, you're putting the microphone in my hand, so I think I have to come up with something really quickly. No, I heard a lot of similarities in terms of struggling to find a place of belonging, identity, and also this pressure to be what people expect you to be, or what their preconceived notions are. You were born under the new moon and the tiger, or you're going to be doing this work, or going to become a prostitute. Just feeling like you don't have the freedom to be who you really are, or to discover who you really are, because you have all these societal or familial pressures and expectations. And that's certainly what I felt like as a young girl growing up in small town Canada, not looking like anybody else, and also having to work at the restaurant and be a good child of immigrants. So I think it feels like there's a lot of commonalities there. And I think, as Eddy said, us being Chinese Canadians, of course that bleeds into our work.
well, I think all the characters on a journey, and sometimes things are just not controllable. I remember getting feedback from one of my short stories, and the editor was like, how do these things happen? Why can't they control the situation? I'm like, are you alive? There's so many factors you can't control. And I think when we write a book, each of us put parts of ourselves into it. And we try to share what we've learned in our journeys as well. So the characters are sort of part of us as well. So,
Well, and I do find that all of you write about circumstances sort of beyond any of the protagonists, or in your case, Rachel, your own control as a young child, right? But by the end of it, I definitely got the sense that there was like agency that was gained throughout, and I felt like that was very empowering to read. So thank you for that. And just a quick thing about, like, do you think you would ever write science fiction fantasy? Would you ever write a memoir? Would you ever write, a novel? I'm just curious, like, again, another geek. So you have to deal with another geeky question, which is like, how did you find the right genre, the right container for the story you wish to tell? Like, why not a short story? Why not a nonfiction? Why not, why not fantasy? Like the opposite of what you wrote.
So I'll say that I like the distance, the safety that fiction affords. I don't know if I would or could write a memoir. I find it's a very courageous thing to do because, in a way, Rachel, you can confirm or deny, but it feels as if you're exposing something very private to the world, and without the veneer of it being fiction. Whereas for me, I mean, I could disguise anything as anything. Like I could write an autobiography and call it fiction and decide what is true and what's not true, and I can decide to what degree to have any element of my work reflect my own identity and my own lived experience, which is something that I do, and I think a lot of fiction authors do. But I am my next book is speculative fiction, so I think it's one step towards sci-fi or that realm.
After I wrote my vampire book, I gave birth, and then I think that shattered my brain for a bit. So then I wrote short fiction. I couldn't concentrate enough to write longer, so I wrote short fiction for a while. And I also wrote a nonfiction book about how to go into publishing because I thought maybe it'll help other people. I found nonfiction easier to write in a way because it's so factual compared to world building. And then a few years later, then I wrote this book. And I don't know, I write everything. I mean, and the reason why I have J.F. Garrard as a name is because I started off with science fiction, and I was hoping to not let people know my gender or my race in a way. I mean, Garrard is a real name. It's my husband's last name. But like, I thought it'll be easier to sell. But then I discovered all the stuff I write is hard to sell because it's such a blend of different religions. Nobody... Like, it's so, I guess, even for the East meets West vampire book, people are like, but vampires are European. Like, how can we sell this? So the marketing people are all confused. So, yeah.
Yes, you defy category. That's definitely true.
Yeah.
And Rachel, do you think you'd ever want to, like, venture into novel fiction?
Well, I wanted to just shine a light on why I write nonfiction. I think I grew up. I talk a lot about the pressures I felt and like the expectations of others, but I grew up hearing that Asian women are submissive and docile and, good little China dolls. And I really wanted to write messy, impolite. I'm a very unlikable character sometimes in my memoir. And that's my way of subverting expectations. That's my way of fighting against that. So that's why I don't know how to write any other way other than just raw and with a lot of vulnerability. But yes, it is very exposing at the same time. But to answer your question, I am currently working on a novel, but fiction really scares me. I think, what do you mean you can just make up anything at any time? It just freaks me out. The possibilities are so scary. But with memoir, I know how A led to B, led to C. So I think it's pushing me. But that might take a little bit. I'm letting that project breathe a bit because I want to, take my time because it is very scary.
What terrifies me is historical fiction.
Oh, wow.
Just the sheer amount of research that has to be done and just the sensitivities and the pressure to get it right. One day, maybe I'll
talk to Jeannie.
Try. Yeah, you read
is
historical
endless.
fiction?
You can,
Well, I guess there's a lot of
historical, but you can go into that rabbit hole, and like what's the price of bread in 1869, and then although I have to admit it's easier with AI, although I don't know if it's always right. I always look for the source because I'm like, are you lying to me? So you do have to do more research on top of the research. So, but it's fun. It's fun. It's like a different world as well. So,
Do you ever get into just fall into research rabbit holes, just
course.
some random thing?
Yeah, definitely. And then you have to stop. But it's hard to stop too, right? Like you just start looking into the archives, and with the internet, oh my gosh, it's made like it's not like you're gonna go to the library and then they'll kick you out of the library. Like it's 24 hours, so you can go on for as long as you like. So it's a little bit debilitating sometimes. So yeah.
So I don't want to hog the panel with my own questions. I'm just going to open it up quickly to the room and see if anybody else has questions for our guest authors. Thank you. Who wants to tackle that one?
Yes, I'll try. I mean, oh gosh, this sounds like a research rabbit hole. Because you can, because you've been doing a lot of research on the environment and trying to figure out what it's like. But at the end of the day, the heart of the story is usually about people. So you have to figure out who your characters are, where they are, and it almost helps for you to write a character sheet. I'm a very visual person, so I tend to like to pull pictures of people. And then as I write, I sort of think about them and what they're going to do. But at the heart of it, it's a story, beginning, middle, and end, I guess. And you have to figure out what's the tale you're trying to tell. All the other events, the political stuff, it's all in the background. That's part of your world building as you're trying to structure the story together. So,
Yeah, so this might be bad advice. So take it with a grain of salt. And I think my marketing director and publicist might disagree with me, but for me, I can only speak from my own perspective. Don't worry too much about genre, right? Like if I were so fixated on the specific genre that my work should fit into, I don't know if I would end up writing anything. And I think that would actually have an eroding effect on the work itself. I think Jeannie, your
the book that I can't sell
was really good. Well, just the advice of just getting to the root of the story you want to tell, right? And letting that guide the process instead of worrying too much about the marketing and the commercial viability. That's what your publishing team, that's their job later down the road. Our jobs as writers is to write the best book possible. And I think the best way to do that is to write the story that we want to write and tell the story that we want to tell without that being perverted by things like the market and what shelf it'll sit on a book in a bookstore.
Well, like if you're going to self-publish, that comes after. Okay, so write the story first, then really later.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to write if I were to write a book with the goal of it being as mainstream as possible and to be as attractive to as many Canadian readers as possible, it probably wouldn't be a very good book, right? Like, it would just be the blandest, beigest story that I can imagine. So
no beige books.
Yeah, no, we don't need any more beige books. And one thing that I'll also mention is that deciding on the genre and how to market this book was actually very challenging for my publishing team because, at the heart of it, there is a mystery. You could call it a mystery or a suspense, but deep down, it's more of an examination of race and class in Canada. And so my editor and I like to say that it's an examination of race and class that's disguised as a mystery. But, is that how the marketing team is going to market it? Probably not. So it could be very challenging. And I just try to not let that side of the business, because it is a business at the end of the day, affect the work that I'm doing.
I think that's that's probably what we're going to end on. Good advice. I think, write the book you want to read, I think. Like write it first and then worry about how it's going to position later. And so on that note, I am going to invite all of us to thank our three wonderful authors tonight.
So we're talking about the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop Community Builders Award. It was started back in 2002. We wanted to recognize people who had built the community, writing community, Paul Yee, Waits and Choi, but they also deferred to Roy Ma, creator of Chinatown News, because if we didn't write the pioneer stories, there wouldn't be anything to follow. And so listening to everybody here on our panel, I mean, we're talking about second, third, fourth generation writers awards, writing novels. So we are recognizing today Winnie Chung. We are recognizing today Bonnie Nish, because these two people have also been on many boards as well. They have helped to build our societies. I'm going to tell you that Winnie also was been on the Vancouver Asian Heritage Month Society. When I first met her, she was looking after International House at at UBC. She has built the Pacific Canada Historical Museum. Did I say that right? And part of it is she takes our histories, the stories of diversity and culture, and makes sure that everybody else is sharing these and recognizing them. She's been on the board for Asian Canadian Writers Workshop when Jim really wanted her to help stabilize our organization and to spread that. Bonnie Nish, I first talked to her when I was helping to build the Historic Joy Kagawa House Society, and CETA's here as well, because we knew that they built things in the community. She's the founder of Pandora's Collective, which has put its roots on all throughout this Metro Vancouver, at the Vancouver Public Library in New Westminster, at so many places. She built literary awards that recognized Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, that recognized rice paper. And she's recruited me for the board for Word Vancouver Festival now, because Bonnie builds community. She talks to Alan and myself and says, what do you want to do for Word Vancouver? And with building partners with both Bonnie and Winnie, they work with other organizations. We work with partners, and this is what happens, that, we can't do anything without our partners. That sounds good? Yes. Please, Bonnie and Winnie, can you come up? Yeah.
So both Bonnie and Willie will have a chance to have some short remarks. Bonnie, would you like to go first?
No.
And Winnie, would you like to give a few remarks? Yes.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Todd and Alan. This is going to be really brief, and to be polite, I should show you my face, but this is doctor's order. I really don't have anything to say, except I want to share this honor with two dear friends who passed on too quickly before we can publicly acknowledge them for all the things they have done in building community. I benefited as a new immigrant because there is a community that people are building, and I find my belonging there. So it's very natural when Jim wants you, that I want you. I can't say no to him. So Jim is such a visionary leader. And the other person, dear friend, is Ada Kong. A different kind of leader, very quiet, always stay in the background. But when work has to be done, she brings calm to chaos. And I still remember the early Literation Festival when we had to be bringing people in, finding hotel rooms and synchronizing the pickup. Ada is the one who brings order to chaos. So I share this honor with my two dear friends and many people who have been working at this, like Alan. I admire you from a distance when you were just a student at UBC. I thought this is a good one to keep. And he has been wonderful and talked for all the flamboyant things you do and the colors you add. You make life so much fun. So thank you very much. Allow me one thing. Because we have all kinds of anniversary coming up, and often we want to find ideas. Well, my ideas are kind of cheap and too many, but this is a gift I got from a friend from many years ago, and I thought, wow, what a good ideas. All those cultural Canadian icons. You can see some of the names, right? And I thought, if we need souvenirs and so on for LiterASIAN or ACWW, or to make things to thank people or raise funds, make a bag so that people buy books and carry this around, right? So some of these names, well, they are all great names, but we need more Asian Canadian names here, okay? Yeah, so that's all I want to say.
We could
Thank
sell
you.
it on the front door.
Okay. We want to present you. We want to present you with a specially designed award for you, Winnie. We need to take a picture as well. Congratulations, Winnie.
Okay.
I don't even remember this one.
We wanted to surprise you.
There you go, Vinny.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And next up is Bonnie Nish. Welcome, Bonnie. Would you like to give a few words?
I just want to, for the record, let you all know that I actually met Todd pulling weeds at Joygagawa House when it was before it was anything. And it was just at the very beginning. So that is how long ago that we met. And what I want to say, well, thank you for this award, because it is so, I am so honored to have my name amongst all the previous recipients of this, and how much I appreciate not just these two people standing here, but I do, because they have been so wonderful to work with. But I come here with a whole community that surrounds me so that we do what we can do. And so I don't take this award myself. I take it for all the community all the people who helped to build this community alongside me. So, and my children who have put up with having poets at the dinner table at midnight talking, and who still to this day volunteer, although I think it's because they get free food. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
So, Bonnie, we have also specially designed this award for you as well. There you go. Don't think I can serve that.